Welcome back to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
And we welcome you back to Talk of the Town for this Wednesday, May 26th. I'm Gary Stevens. Very pleased on a monthly basis to have this gentleman join us to talk a little bit about elections, about other legal matters involving Ottawa County. As the clerk and the Register of Deeds, he is Justin Roebuck, and we will try to keep calm as we discuss things with him. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. It's good to be with you, Gary.
We will try to carry on as we say, and if you have a question for Justin, he'll be happy to take it at 616-395-1450, 616-395-1450. We're going to throw Justin into the deep end right away. We mentioned in our first half hour, Peg mentioned a press briefing this afternoon involving Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and Michigan Attorney General Dina Nessel expected to comment on current election legislation that is going through the State House and the State Senate. I put this to your colleague in Allegan County, Bob Janetsky, last Friday. I'll put it to you as well. How aware are you of the number of bills that are coming in? Not just one, but a number of bills in both the House and Senate dealing with election reform.
Yeah, well, we definitely are keeping a close eye on pretty much all of those. In my role as the vice chair of what's called the Council of Michigan Election Officials, basically local and county clerks together working on legislative issues. I've been doing a lot of bill reading over the past several weeks, and a big part of it is this 39 bill package that's come out of the state Senate, but also a number of bills in the House that deal with very similar things as well. And we're kind of working through a number of conversations with our legislators, trying to shore up some of those bills, make them stronger. And in a couple of cases, there are just some elements there that where the bills make sense, but logistically, administratively, from the clerk's perspective, there are ways that we could make it work better. And so I've been very encouraged by a number of the conversations we've had with our legislature over some of those bills too.
Is it a case more than anything else that some of the legislation are needed reforms, needed corrections in the system, and others are simply punitive or political in nature? And sometimes in decrying some of those bills that might be seen as more political, you'd be throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because some of those other bills really address needs that need to be taken care of.
Yeah, I think that hits the nail on the head, Gary. I really do, because there's a lot of things that we can always improve our processes. I'm a firm believer in the fact that we are not perfect as a system anywhere in the country, not in Michigan, not in Ottawa County. And I think there are always ways that we can look to challenge ourselves and make sure we're moving forward, both from the standpoint of election security, but also access to voters, right? We want to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat, as Secretary Benson has said, as our Republicans in the state Senate have concurred. That phrase, easy to vote and hard to cheat, should be our mantra, right, as election officials. So I think you're right. I think there's a couple of these bills that are probably born out of real and legitimate concerns, but also have significant unintended consequences for our voters. And those are problems for me. I think we really have to have a high standard when we are making it more difficult for people to vote. We need to make sure that those kinds of actions are really legitimized by proof, hard proof of voter fraud or of negligence in the system. And I'm not seeing that on a couple of these bills.
Should elections, for the most part, be handled on a local basis? There has been some talk about maybe some national election legislation coming out of Congress. Some say it's needed to make it uniform, especially in presidential elections or elections involving the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. Others saying, hey, it's a states' rights issue, it's a constitutional issue.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think I think there should be a balance there. There are a couple of things that I really feel like probably should be handled or at least funded or sponsored at the national level. One of those things is a national connection of state voter databases, so that when you move to another state, there is a federal process and a federal program that essentially identifies voters who've moved to another state, removes them from the voter rolls where they previously lived. We have an independent consortium of states that are doing that now. Michigan's a part of it. There's about 31 other states that have joined that process. But to me, that's something the feds should really be doing. Outside of that, quite honestly, I believe decentralization in our process is one of the most fundamental things, not only that make us unique in America, but really it's a security issue. It is a strong statement to say that we're decentralized to the point where we don't have the ability for a central power, whether it's a foreign power or some kind of conspiracy within the U.S. to hack all of our voting systems, because we're so unique and we're so separate from one another. There's some challenges that go along with that, but I also think there's some really good things. And I would say too, on the national level, there's been a lot of talk about HR1 and S1, these voting bills that have come before the House and the Senate. Locally here, Congressman Heising has been very opposed to HR1, and I would concur with him on that. I've had a couple of really good discussions with him about HR1, and I firmly believe that the vast majority of that legislation would be detrimental to the process. It's micromanaging our elections process to the point where it would really hamper the ability for us as local election officials to deliver for our voters.
And the thing with HR1, some say it might not even cut constitutional mustard. It might pass, it might be signed into law, it might be struck down in the courts on constitutional basis. We'll see about that.
Right.
616-395-1450, 616-395-1450. If you have a question for Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds, Justin Roebuck. Justin, let's stay on elections for a couple of moments. The audit is in. I don't want to be presumptuous in saying we expected no problems from your office. But considering how Ottawa County has been running its elections, with Dan before you as the clerk, and the way that the process is in Ottawa County with its transparency and the backup system of paper ballots. I mean, when you have an audit, it's almost like, hey, we're doing fine. We don't mind this test. It just shows how fine we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think for us that it accomplishes a couple of things, right? Obviously, it allows our citizens to make sure that they can view and see the process, and make sure that they understand what's going on and that we are double checking our work and making sure that everything's going smoothly. And frankly, every audit is also a learning opportunity where there are elements of the way that things are done that we can see improvement areas in. So it's always a good opportunity. I never turn down the responsibility of doing an audit. And this one was kind of unique in the sense that we were joined actually by two state government agencies, one the Michigan Bureau of Elections. We've had a lot of conversations with the Bureau of Elections over the past couple of years about the risk limiting audit process, which is basically like a scientific, what I would describe as a scientific poll of audits across the state, or a poll of ballots, excuse me, where they basically arrive at, a polling conclusion that says, yes, the data shows that this proposal or this candidate passed or won. But they were actually experimenting a couple of levels with different types of risk limiting audits. We did hand count every single ballot for the audit in those individual precincts selected, and 100% of those ballots counted correctly in the machines on election day, and the totals were read into our system correctly. So definitely an encouragement there, but also we were joined by the State Auditor General's office, and they are essentially auditing the audit, which gets a little bit like the movie Inception after a while. I'm not sure how much further you could go down that path, but It was good. It was a good experience for them to witness this. This is actually the first time that the Auditor General's office has participated in a post-election audit. So kind of a unique thing, and very grateful to the City of Holland for hosting us there as well. So,
by the way, to put to our listeners' eyes, we're in a Zoom conversation right now with Justin Roebuck. If I put a mirror behind me, it would reflect the camera in front of me, and we'll just go boom, boom, boom. Like that's the image I'm getting of these audits. It's like you're into a never-ending time tunnel, as they say. If
that's
you got
a little bit what it felt like.
If you got a question for Justin Roebuck, he'll be happy to answer it at 616-395-1450. One more election question. I don't know if I brought it up with you. If I have, I apologize. I'll revisit this topic. One of the reforms that I have seen, or shall we say I have gotten reports of, is an effort to streamline even further the election windows. A few years ago, and I think it was under Ruth Johnson, if not Terry Lynn Land, we started having 4 windows of opportunity for local areas to hold elections. One in the February, one on the first Tuesday in May, one on the first Tuesday in August, and one on the first Tuesday of November. Now I'm seeing where there's an effort to maybe join the May and August windows, put it into June to streamline it a little more. I may be going against a lot of clerks' ideas who say, yeah, one less election, that's fine. I'm of the opinion I like the August primary 90 days before the November primary, so that you have a time period, you wean down to 2 finalists, and they have 90 days to campaign in that regard. I think between June and November, a 5-month swing is just a little bit too far. That's my opinion. But as a clerk, you might see things a little differently.
No, I definitely see that argument, and I think that is probably one of the stronger arguments, against this proposal, this idea of connecting the August primary, bumping it back essentially to June. There are a lot of states that do a June primary or an earlier than August primary. We've got about 30 states in the country, I think, that do an earlier primary than August. And really the main reason for that, the main reason I support that is essentially it becomes an accuracy and a transparency issue. The window, the deadlines for election administrators are so tight in between that August and November time. We have a federal mandate to get ballots out into the hands of overseas and military voters 45 days prior to every election, which means that we have to have the ballot programmed, proofed, printed, proofs mailed to candidates, candidate corrections mailed back, that whole process, then ballots ordered and printed and sent to our local clerks within a pretty narrow margin, both when we have the primary election, and then immediately following that primary election, we have the nominating conventions of political parties, particularly the Republican Party. The Democratic Party actually does their nominating conventions a little earlier. So it's a really tight window of time. And quite often what happens, especially in larger communities, there's litigation over ballot proposals or over candidates on the ballot. So some things get tied up in courts. And what that ends up being is a really short, narrow window of time that we have to get things exactly right. As you know, there's not room for error on ballots. There's no room for error. There's not a margin that is acceptable for an error on a ballot, right? And I believe that giving election officials that bigger window of time increases the likelihood that errors are not going to occur. But what it also does is adds for better transparency. Currently, under the process that we have between August and November, we have basically zero margin for a post-election audit of our August primary, where we've had to cut short the audit basically because of the timelines of how things have to be sealed after a certain time after certification as well. And so that to me is a transparency issue. We could have a much broader window of time to make sure that we get our training right, our auditing right, our ballot printing and proofing process right. And that's why I support that. But I agree. I think there's something, in the heart of any red-blooded American that shivers a little bit at the thought of extending a campaign season another 6 months. So I think that is one of the main concerns. But I do think it ultimately would save taxpayer money as well. Putting a school or local millage issues that quite frequently go on a May ballot, but yet have very small turnout. We'd be saving some significant taxpayer dollars by putting those onto a primary ballot, having those decisions be made by a wider audience of voters. So I think there's some really positive things there that we can see.
Of course, a good compromise saying, okay, June is too soon and August is too late. Let's go July.
Let's go the 4th of July. Let's just have it on the 4th of July.
Well, here's the thing with the increased absentee ballots, early balloting, and mail-in balloting that we have, not as many people need to be physically in the polls and working the polls that day. Yes, you're going to have to need volunteers to handle it, but first Tuesday in July might be a good compromise. We'll see about that. 616-395-1450 if you have a question for Justin Roebuck. Before we take our break, I do want to mention that the governor's announcements about relaxing some of the COVID-19 health restrictions will have an effect on the office operations for the county clerk and the Register of Deeds. Tell us a little bit about what will happen next Tuesday morning.
Yes, next Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., we are officially not by appointment any longer in the county clerk's office, as well as the other offices around the county. So you do not need an appointment June 1 or later to come to our office for any services, as well as our satellite office locations for vital records and Register of Deeds offices. The main one there is on James Street in Holland. That's one of our busiest locations. We're going to be able to fully open that again, as well as our Grand Haven satellite office location for those services as well. So we're really quite excited about that. I think our staff is ready to get back to normal. And certainly our customers we know are ready to get back to normal. And so June 1, no appointment needed. You can come into Holland, you can come into Grand Haven, and we'll get you taken care of. So we're excited.
One of the annual tasks, Justin, of the Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds office is to present a report to the Ottawa County Board of how things went in your office. And that was a task that I don't want to say you cheerfully did, but you certainly, your office certainly provided to the board earlier this week.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where we're required to give this annual report, but it's also really helpful for us as we pull together some stats as a team and see what the performance looked like for the year. And obviously, 2020 was an incredible challenge for all of us. Some of the things that really do stick out, unfortunately, our deaths were up in Ottawa County pretty significantly over the past several cycles. We had a 17% increase over last year. And our births were down a little bit. So it's actually the first year in a long time where births are, we had basically our birth rate is decreased more than our death rate increased. So kind of significant there. But the other, on more positive news, in the Register of Deeds office, land transactions were up very significantly, obviously, due to a lot of factors. But basically over 10,000 more documents recorded this year than last year. Actually, over 10,000 over the previous 3-year average. And a record number of those documents were recorded electronically. So the electronic recording of documents basically allowed us to continue through the entire shutdown, making sure that people were able to transact business here in Ottawa County with land records.
I'm going to throw a curveball at you.
Yeah.
Whether or not your office does this, or maybe you have it in hand, I don't know, because you have to record births for the county. And of course, you have to, get the birth certificates put into the things. Popular names for boys and girls.
Yes. And actually, what's funny is we have done that over the past, I will get back to you for sure on the actual list, because the past several years we've produced a list. And I will say that I remember last year, Olive was the most popular girl's name. And that was last cycle, though. So I don't know if that's changed at all. But what is fascinating to me is everything old is definitely new again. All of those very traditional names that you could think of. Theodore is a really popular name for boys right now. Olive is up there for girls. So yeah, interesting trends where you can see like similarly, names in the daycare might match names in our nursing home facilities in Ottawa County right now. It's just kind of an interesting process.
By the way, one of the more humorous baby name stories that I know of, a friend of my older sister and mine, when she was born, the nurse that helped the mother give birth was named Stella. And she named her daughter Stella in honor of the nurse. And Stella got used to the name, but for a while it was like nobody else I knew was named Stella.
Right.
And of course the Marlon Brando classic line,
yes,
brings that out. But of course, I would say maybe some names might not be as popular now. We've seen Karen become a little bit
right,
used in a negative frame, and others as well. But certainly some good news from the Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds office. And again, as you mentioned, no more appointments necessary for the offices beginning on Tuesday, and the satellite offices in Grand Haven and in Holland will reopen for full duties. Of course, the office in the Fillmore Township, Fillmore Street complex is still operational. And yes, I believe you have a satellite in Georgetown Township, right?
Yes, we do. Our Hudsonville office will not reopen this Tuesday, but you can look for that announcement probably within the next couple of weeks. So every Tuesday we're there in the district court building on Port Sheldon Street in Georgetown.
Yeah, GT, as the people of the township would like to say, GT, the place to be, which is
that's right.
I could say I can talk down with it because I live there, and
a beautiful community.
Well, it is, but it's still a township and not a city. With that, we'll button up our conversation with Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds Justin Roebuck. Thank you very much, as always, for your time and your thoughts. Wish you and your family well over the next few weeks, and if all goes well, we'll do this again in June.
Sounds great. Good to be with you, Gary.
Thank you very much, Justin Roebuck on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.